Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Caitlin Burke.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. New details are emerging about the man the French authorities say had plans to carry out another terror attack near Paris, this one targeting Christians. Today, we're getting a look at the suspect, Sid Ahmed Glam. He's a 24-year-old Algerian computer science student. Authorities believe he was planning another massacre in France, like the attacks at Charlie Hebdo magazine and the kosher supermarket.
This time it was Christians, French Catholics, who were targeted.
On Sunday, Glam tried to carry out his violent plan in a quiet Paris suburb. Police believe he killed a woman who was sitting in her car. Shortly after that, he shot himself in the foot and called an ambulance for help. French officials say Glam was on a watch list of people who might try to travel to Syria. Right now, investigators want to find anyone he may have been working with. Last night, police did arrest a person suspected to be acquainted with him, but police are not releasing further details about that person.
4 young Minnesota men are in federal court today, accused of conspiring to sneak into Syria to join ISIS. A total of 6 young men between the ages of 19 and 21 were part of the plot. U.S. Attorney Andrew Lugar said they planned for 10 months, even as co-conspirators were caught and charged.
To be clear, we have a terror recruiting problem in Minnesota. And this case demonstrates how difficult it is to put an end to recruiting here. These are focused men who are intent on joining a terrorist organization by any means possible.
2 of the suspects made it to California, where they're facing charges as well. One of them posted jihadist images on Facebook and last year told an informant, "There's nothing for me in this world." Authorities say dozens of young Somali men have traveled from Minnesota to join terrorist groups in Somalia and Syria.
Concerns over radical Islam are emerging in Idaho. This week, a former Muslim turned Christian pastor warned a crowd at a Republican Party event about the threat of Muslims moving to the state. A State House panel recently killed a child support enforcement bill after Idaho residents testified the state could potentially be bound to enforce Islamic law under that act.
As world powers focus on trying to curb Iran's nuclear pursuits, there's new evidence North Korea is building nuclear bombs at an alarming rate. China's warning that North Korea's nuclear program is much larger than previously believed. And now some worry the Iranians could follow North Korea's playbook by also hiding its nuclear intentions. George Thomas has the details.
The North Koreans may have as many as 20 nuclear warheads, and that number could climb to 50 or 100 in the next 5 years. According to the Wall Street Journal, Chinese nuclear experts are also warning that North Korea's ability to produce weapons-grade uranium could double by next year. The assessment comes as a top U.S. military official believes North Korea is now capable of launching a missile with a nuclear warhead that could reach much of the western United States. Admiral William Gortney, head of U.S. Northern Command, says, "Our assessment is that they have the ability to put a nuclear weapon on a KN-08 and shoot it at the homeland. We assess that it's operational today, and so we practice to go against it." North Korea's expanding arsenal has Japan and South Korea particularly concerned. This week, the U.S. signed a new nuclear energy agreement, allowing South Korea to conduct nuclear research, but not to produce its own nuclear fuel.
It is an agreement befitting of the deep partnership and strong alliance that exists between our 2 countries.
A top North Korean shot back at the agreement, calling America's foreign policy hostile to the region.
The anachronistic, hostile policy of the U.S. on the DPRK and its reckless confrontation mania prolonged the touch-and-go situation in the Korean Peninsula.
The revelation of the North's accelerated nuclear program has some Republican lawmakers worried about President Obama's deal with Iran that is supposed to limit its nuclear program. A 1996 agreement with North Korea was supposed to stop Pyongyang's nuclear capabilities. It didn't. Instead, now the North is building a set of nuclear weapons. The chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, told the Journal he fears the same could happen with Iran. "We saw how North Korea was able to game this whole process. I wouldn't be surprised if Iran had its hands on the same playbook." George Thomas, CBN News.
The president's pick to replace Attorney General Eric Holder is headed for a confirmation vote in the Senate today. This comes 5 months after he nominated Loretta Lynch for the job, and only after a deal was reached Wednesday on the human trafficking bill. Lynch is expected to win approval with the support of all Democrats and at least 5 Republicans. Right now, she serves as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. With today's vote, she will become the nation's first black female Attorney General.
The Oklahoma House and Senate have passed a religious freedom bill to protect the rights of clergy. The legislation says pastors and others who perform weddings cannot be forced to perform same-sex marriages if that violates their religious beliefs. The measure also shields churches from being required to participate in the ceremonies.
Israelis are celebrating their 67th national birthday and that miracle that led to their independence. Chris Mitchell takes us to the heart of Tel Aviv, where it all started.
על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
Here in Independence Hall on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the formation of the State of Israel. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people were a nation once again.
This is where Israel was born. When people come here, they are astonished to see this place. Most of the people that visit here, their first reaction is, this is it? That's all you have here?
Ben-Gurion and his team looked for an inconspicuous place to declare statehood. At the time, Independence Hall, one of the first buildings in Tel Aviv, was an art gallery. During a 1978 renovation, the decision was made to take the building back to its original look at the time of the declaration.
Traveling in Israel will teach you that God has a tendency to perform his best miracles in the most humble places. This place is one of those places.
According to Isaac Dror, who heads education at the Hall, the establishment of Israel shook the world and became a haven for the Jewish people.
How many people prayed for it every day when the Jews said next year in Jerusalem and next year in Jerusalem? That's what they meant.
When Israel declared its independence, dancing filled the streets. But the celebration was short-lived. The very next day, armies of 5 Arab nations invaded the newborn state.
When it comes to the story of the War of Independence, we don't have many answers there. Very hard for us to explain. Call it a miracle, call it whatever you want, but we are here.
130,000 people visit this tiny hall each year to hear about the miracle of Israel, including tourists like this group from Massachusetts.
I didn't expect it to be so moving. My whole life, Israel has always been here. So I think in some ways took it for granted. And now I, felt like I was here that day.
After 2,000 years of wandering and persecution, for Jews to have their own state really has to be a miracle.
Across the street is this monument with a scripture from Jeremiah. Again I will build you, and you shall be rebuilt, O Virgin of Israel. Surrounded by skyscrapers and a new generation visiting the hall, it's testament to God's faithfulness to his promise to build and rebuild the Jewish state and its people. Chris Mitchell, CBN News at Independence Hall in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Up next, it's a crisis that's growing out of control, and some say if it isn't fixed, America won't survive it. Find out why a convention of the states could be in our near future.
The U.S. national debt now stands at $18 trillion, and it's projected to reach $25 trillion within a decade. Paying off the interest on that debt is likely to get very expensive in the years ahead. Right now, with low interest rates, the government spends $200 billion a year paying the interest. But the Wall Street Journal reports government forecasts show those interest payments are going to shoot up, reaching $800 billion a year by the end of this decade. That will cost more than the defense budget and other key parts of the budget. And those interest payments could go much higher in the years after that. So the national debt is going to become very expensive and could help lead to higher taxes in the years ahead.
It seems like something everyone knows except the politicians in Washington. The exploding national debt threatens our country's future.
Well, now one group wants to take action by amending the Constitution. Now, that won't be easy, but as David Brody reports, this time it's being tried in a way that's never been done before.
When you add up $18 trillion of debt, a dysfunctional Congress, and activist judges taking power from the people, you get frustration and an attitude of enough is enough.
You've got to get mad. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs.
One group is getting up and taking action in the form of the Convention of States. Conservative legal scholar Michael Farris heads it up.
Washington, D.C. will never fix itself, and we've got to have a solution from a different direction.
That direction is to amend the Constitution by going directly to the states and bypassing Congress. Article 5 of the Constitution says if 2/3 of the states agree, they can call a convention to offer new amendments. Once that happens, then any amendments proposed at the convention must be ratified by 3/4 of the states.
Our purpose is to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and impose term limits on federal officials.
It won't be easy. The last constitutional convention happened more than 200 years ago, in 1787. Since then, all 27 amendments have originated in Congress. Still, the movement has steam. Georgia, Florida, and Alaska have approved such a convention, with North Dakota, Arkansas, and Arizona close to making a decision. Farris and company believe 20 states could join the movement this year alone. They hope to have their 2/3 majority by 2016 to move forward.
It's not going to happen this year, and it may not happen next year, but it's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years because our fiscal issues are going to drive it to us.
Organizers want a balanced budget amendment as the main priority, while other possibilities include term limits and stopping the abuse of executive powers. Virginia Delegate Scott Lingamfelter believes it is up to the states to make a difference.
Congress, I believe, has abrogated their responsibility. They have been almost horsewhipped into submission, in a sense, by an activist judicial branch and an overreaching executive branch. I'm done wishing for a solution. I'm now acting for one.
That solution means a convention with a specific agenda, not a free-for-all.
Maybe the resolution should speak to the issue of constraining or limiting federal power, because that's the big problem that we face, is this sort of huge explosion of federal power over the states.
Critics from both sides say a constitutional convention would not play out the way proponents hope. They point out that Article 5 fails to lay out a set of rules that would prevent parties from tossing out random amendments. Some have even created scare tactic scenarios, such as a proposed amendment to repeal the Second Amendment's right to gun ownership.
You can scare people to death and say, oh, you're going to lose your Second Amendment right. I mean, just common sense tells you, if you look at the South and the mid-central portion of this country, plus Vermont, there's no way the Second Amendment's ever going to go away. That's fear-driven. You should be afraid of what's happening right now, which is far worse than that. None of those things are going to happen, but it's a good way to stop us from fixing the problem. And the problem has to be fixed if we're to save our country.
Those taking action say the future is at stake, even if the odds are stacked against them.
Do you really want to answer that question? Well, son, I wish I had done more. Or do you want to answer that question this way? I fought back and we won.
When people tell me that it's impossible to do this, I go, cool. That means that it's going to be a God project, not a Mike Farris project.
David Brody, CBN News.
Coming up, the movie that's stealing the show before it's even been released. Hear how faith plays a key role in the remarkable story of the little boy.
Hi everybody, Lori Johnson here, CBN's health reporter. Listen to this shocking statistic. The number of teenagers smoking e-cigarettes tripled in just 1 year. Now, the number of teens smoking regular cigarettes is down, but contrary to popular belief, these e-cigarettes are not safe, especially for teenagers whose brains are still developing. You can read more about e-cigarettes on my Healthy Living blog on cbnnews.com.
The movie Little Boy opens in theaters tomorrow. Set in the 1940s, it's the story of a little boy with great faith that his dad will return home alive from serving in World War II.
Mark Martin caught up with the 11-year-old kid whose faith in Jesus Christ helped him to take on the title role of this inspiring film.
Well, tell us about Pepper, the main character in Little Boy.
Well, Pepper Flint Busby is a 7, 8-year-old who is very small for his age, and everybody picks on him except for his dad. His dad is the only one who really spends time with him. And Pepper has the biggest faith and the biggest love out of anyone in the entire world. And his love is centered on his father. And then his father has to go to war, so he's just devastated and tries through all his power, all that he can do to get his dad back through faith.
Describe his faith.
He thought if he can get enough faith for God, then he can bring his dad home. So his intentions were to bring his dad home, but yes, his faith was centered on God.
And there's a scene in the movie where Pepper's faith is challenged by his brother. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Pepper, he feels like if he can get enough faith, he can bring his dad back, and his brother doesn't believe at all. His brother looks at what is there, not what could be there.
Well, Pepper really had a close relationship with his dad and his family. You come from a big family and a family of faith. Tell us how all of that helped you play this role.
Well, coming from a big family and coming from a church and coming from my dad, he's a preacher and he leads in worship, and sometimes I get up there with him and sing out my heart. You know, it's great. I mean, it's a great privilege, and I'm glad to be part of the family that I'm in.
Talk about your Christian faith and what Jesus means to you.
I believe that he'll always be there, just picking me up when I fall, and picking anyone who needs help when they fall. And I believe that he's the one and only God.
And so how did this family of faith, this background of being raised in a Christian home, how did that help you play the part of Pepper?
Well, living with siblings, it can be tough. And they just supported me throughout all I did. And just learning how to act when they come in my room, or when they're playing video games with me, or when we're playing a board game. I mean, it's just how to react, and that helps a lot on my acting skills.
Did you find yourself during the movie praying at different times, you know, for God to help you, for Jesus to help you, maybe to memorize your lines or to get a scene right?
I actually prayed between every single scene because my dad told me when something gets hard, just pray for it. Pray that God will help you, and he will. He always has an answer. It might not come right away, it might come later, or it might come right that second. And I just prayed between every single scene, and next thing you know, I'm acting like I was born to because of his gift, you know.
So do you hope to do more acting?
I hope to be a quadruple threat. A singer, actor, dancer, and preacher on and off set.
What would you say would be the main point that you want people to take away from the movie?
I want people to take away from the movie thinking they can be the best of the quality of themselves and thinking they can be the best of themselves.
How have you seen God use this movie already and work through it already?
I've seen that the crew and the cast and just everybody I worked with and everybody who worked with me just became better people. Not because of me, but because God. And I believe that this movie will affect everyone who sees it.
How did this movie affect your faith?
This movie affected my faith through just belief. And I believe that if you have enough faith, you can move a mountain. But it's not you who's moving it, it's God. So put your faith into God.
What a kid. And there's a scene in the movie where he does say, you know, I hit the faith to move a mountain. Indeed, a quadruple threat.
Yes. We'll be right back. CBN is working to help provide drinking water to communities in Africa. According to a recent report by the World Health Organization and UNICEF, millions of people still lack access to improved sources of drinking water in the world. Nearly half are in sub-Saharan Africa. CBN is working to meet that need in 4 countries in West Africa. So far this year, an estimated 21,000 people now enjoy clean drinking water from 34 fresh wells built by CBN. And CBN supporters are helping to make a difference throughout the world. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.
And finally, a note of thanks to pass along to you on this Thankful Thursday. We are all quick to give God thanks for the blessings He gives us, but it's also important to be grateful for those things that He hasn't given, because in the long run, it is for our good. So today, I pray, thank you, God, for the windows you've opened and the doors you've closed. You know what's best for me when I trust you and when I don't. And you may not be willing to admit it, but I certainly am. There are times that I don't trust God, and I think I know better. But guess what? I am always wrong on that one.
That's it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com.
We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Do them on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We'll be watching for them, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.